So I was talking to someone recently about managing nerves, how I managed my nerves before a performance, about stage fright, performance anxiety, those kinds of things. And it reminded me of a conversation, of a trick that someone taught me many years ago when I was first starting to perform. And what's nice about this is it's a great way of getting you in the zone anyway. So often you can approach a performance and not feel particularly up for it or feel a bit lackluster. Well, this is a great way of sort of injecting a bit of positivity into yourself, giving you that enthusiasm to get there and get on with the gig. So I remember when I first started performing, I really did suffer from stage fright, and it would happen days before the actual performance, and until that final night before the performance I just couldn't sleep at all, and then the next day I'd just be beating myself up about the performance itself, about what it would feel like. And that whole travel to the venue before playing was just horrible. It was like the walk to the gallows or something like that. Thankfully I don't suffer from that anymore. But this is one of the approaches that I took that allowed me to deal with this. Now I'll tell you what didn't work for me. What didn't work was trying to rationalise this feeling away, just to try and intellectually deal with it, tell me that the performance didn't really matter, that no one was going to die if I played a bum note. That kind of thing just doesn't work. And also what didn't work for me was practising. It didn't matter how good I was at playing the guitar, I'd still get performance anxiety. And actually, the better you get, the more that can add another layer to you, because you suddenly feel like you've got something that you need to prove to people. You have to prove your skills, the skills that you've developed. So practising, if you like, can add to the anxiety, not take away from it. And finally, booze, drinking just doesn't help at all. I found I'd get drunk and feel nervous. So that was completely useless to me as well. Now, I've spoken previously about mindfulness. Now, what I'm talking about here is not mindfulness. Mindfulness is a kind of a way of dealing with that inner self-talk, for quieting that negative self-talk, that negative spiral that you can sometimes bring yourself down in, where you're just feeling anxious all of the time. And it's a way of just calming your mind down. So I feel like mindfulness is calming the negative self-doubt down, whereas this is an approach to injecting a new feeling, a new state in yourself. So what I'm actually talking about is modelling someone, choosing someone who embodies the state or the approach that you want to instill in yourself, and starting to adapt some of those traits into yourself. And so the approach is this: you choose someone that reflects the outlook or the attitude that you want to take into yourself. And the best idea is to find someone that you can properly relate to, that you're compatible with, if you see what I mean, that you have a similar outlook to. And then you study them. You study their mannerisms, you study their behaviour, you study their approach to things like that. But for me, what really worked was to start to think about what's going on inside their heads. What's their self-talk like? What are they thinking about when they're doing these different situations, when they're playing or performing, or when they're approaching a performance or something like that? What's going on inside is most important to me. And what I would do is I'd choose a series of scenarios. So for example, we were talking about that whole period of time approaching the gig. So what you do is you think about that person and you think, okay, when this guy is approaching a gig and the day before he's just about to play, what's he thinking about? What's his internal dialogue like? What's going on in his head when he's approaching that gig? And then think about, okay, what if he was living my life? What if he came and sat where I was at the moment and was sitting here approaching this particular performance that I'm going to do? How would he talk to himself? What's his internal dialogue like right now? And then see if you can pull that into yourself. See if you can merge that into yourself and see if you can experience it yourself. And then move on to the next scenario. Imagine, for example, him travelling to the venue, for example. What's the journey like? How does he cope with travelling to a venue? What's his internal dialogue like? What's his self-talk like? Is he relaxed about it? Is he anticipating the gig? Is it positive? And then imagine him making the same journey that you're making. And imagine how he'd approach that same journey as well. And then see if you can pull that state inside you as well. See if you can experience it and try and experience it as vividly as possible. And try and live it as though he was living it, as though it was part of yourself as well. Let you merge with those feelings. And then move on to the next scenario. Imagine you've arrived at the venue that you're meeting the rest of your bandmates if you're playing with other people, or you're meeting the event organiser or the pub landlord or whoever it is. Imagine how he would approach that situation as well. And then imagine what's going on in his head, the self-talk, the attitude that he has, the attitude that he brings to that situation. And see what it feels like. Try and pull those feelings inside yourself and imagine yourself experiencing those same feelings as well in that same situation. And then move on to the next scenario. Maybe it's waiting to get on stage. What's he doing? Well, he's waiting to get on stage. If he was waiting in the same situation that you're waiting in, what would he be feeling? Can you create those feelings? Can you create those thoughts, that self-talk? Can you pull that into yourself? Can you feel yourself experiencing that self-talk? And then finally, let's say, walking on stage. How does he walk on stage? How would you walk on stage? You know, again, can you pull those feelings? And what you're trying to do is build layers, stacks of these kinds of scenarios, imagining the state that he's in and imagine what it feels like if you're in that same state as well. So what's going on here? So we're using our imagination to create a series of scenarios, and we're imagining the feelings that you would experience in each of those situations, and we're putting some positive feelings in each of those situations as well, and we're mentally rehearsing them. And I know it sounds like it doesn't work, but it really does. I mean, have you ever, for example, had a mental argument with someone? You've imagined yourself arguing about something with someone. The argument's never happened, but you feel yourself getting angry and frustrated inside about something that you're just imagining. Well, that's an example of an imaginary situation, an imaginary scenario, creating a state inside of you, and you're doing just the same thing with these mental rehearsals, with these patterns that we're building here as well. So once you've got this series of mentally rehearsed situations, you can start to apply them in the actual situation as well. So when you're actually, it comes to the day before that you're going to play the gig, what should you feel like? Pull in those feelings again, pull in those states, and allow yourself to walk through the day using the emotions and using the imaginary scenarios that you've been working on prior to the gig as well. And see how that makes you feel. Because the more you do this, the better you'll get at this. It's like anything else, the more you practice it, the better you get. And actually what I've found is over the years as well, the more you play gigs anyway with a positive attitude, the easier it becomes to play gigs with a positive attitude, to the state where these days I just don't get anything like the same level of stage fright or performance anxiety that I used to get in the early days. That's a thing of the past now for me. So hopefully this approach will work for you as well. Give it a try and see if it works for you. And we'll chat next time. Goodbye.